The pregnancy test trembled in Sarah's hands as she stared at the two pink lines. Her face was a mix of joy and something else, fear maybe. I felt confused, unable to fully understand the emotion behind it. "We're having a baby," she said, her voice filled with excitement as she embraced me. I returned the hug, but something about the moment felt off. We'd been married for 3 years, and we'd always been careful, particularly in following our religious values. I had always insisted on using protection, without exception, as we had agreed to wait a few more years before starting a family. "But how?" I asked, still trying to process the situation. "We always use protection." Sarah's expression shifted slightly. "Maybe one broke. It happens, right? Does it really matter? We're having a baby." Before I could respond, she kissed me, her excitement overshadowing my confusion. I wish I had paid more attention to the signs earlier. The late nights she'd spent at work, the new yoga classes she claimed to have joined, the sudden password changes on her phone. Sarah had always been fiercely independent, but in recent months, something had felt different. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew something had shifted. That evening, while Sarah was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. I wasn't the type to snoop, but the preview notification caught my eye. "Mike can't wait to see you tomorrow." The rest of the message was hidden, but my heart raced. I knew Mike, a new project manager at her office who had started about 6 months ago. Sarah had mentioned him a few times, always in a professional context. But there was something about that message that didn't feel right. I heard the shower turn off and quickly moved away from her phone. That night, as Sarah slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, my mind swirling with unsettling thoughts. I didn't want to confront the pregnancy, the strange messages, or her recent behavior. But slowly, they began to form a picture I wasn't ready to face. The next morning, I took a half day off work without telling Sarah. Instead of heading home, I parked across from her office building. The guilt of spying on my wife gnawed at me, but the uncertainty was worse. At 2:15 p.m., I watched Sarah leave the building, but she didn't walk to her usual parking spot. Instead, she made her way to a small cafe 2 blocks away. A tall, well-dressed man was waiting outside. When he greeted her, there was an intimacy in his touch that made my stomach turn. His hand lingered on her lower back as they walked into the cafe together. I waited for 20 minutes, then followed them inside. They weren't there. The barista mentioned that a couple matching their description had gone upstairs to a private dining area. My hands shook as I climbed the stairs, each step bringing me closer to a truth I didn't want to face, but feared I already knew. The private dining area was empty, except for a door leading to a small balcony. Through the glass, I saw them. Sarah was pressed against the railing, Mike's hands on her waist as they kissed. My world tilted. I stood frozen, watching as my wife, my pregnant wife, wrapped her arms around him. Her arms were draped around the neck of another man, a familiarity in the way she held him that shattered me. I must have made some sound because Sarah's eyes locked onto mine through the glass. Her face drained of color. "James," she stammered, quickly pushing Mike away and straightening her blouse. "This isn't what you think. I can explain." But I was already descending the stairs, my mind racing, my vision blurry. Sarah's heels clicked quickly behind me, her voice calling my name. Outside, the bright sunlight felt like a slap, mocking the darkness that had just swallowed my world. "James, please," she shouted, catching up to me and grabbing my arm. "It's not like you think. Mike and it was just a mistake. A one-time thing." I turned to face her, my voice coming out surprisingly steady. "A one-time thing? Is that why you're carrying a child?" Her face crumpled. "No! The baby is yours, James. I swear, we always use protection." "Sarah," I interrupted, cutting her off. "Every single time. Do you really think I'm that naive?" Mike stepped forward, his usual professional demeanor now tinged with discomfort. "James, Maybe we should. I interrupted him with a laugh that sounded far too unhinged. A shock. Finding out my wife is pregnant with her boss's child after we've been using protection this whole time? Yeah, I'd say that's a shock. Sarah's mascara had begun to run, her composed image disintegrating. Please, James, I'll do anything. We can work through this. I'll quit my job. I'll cut off all contact with Mike. Please don't throw our marriage away. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw a stranger. The woman I thought I knew, the one I had trusted completely, never existed. The person before me now was someone else. A liar, a cheater, someone capable of months of carefully planned deceit. Our marriage, I said softly. You threw that away the moment you decided to sleep with him. You just didn't bother telling me. As I turned to leave, Sarah called out to me, her voice breaking. Where are you going, James? Please. We need to talk about this. I didn't look back. I've got some calls to make, I said coldly, starting with our lawyer. The next few days passed in a blur of rage and cold calculation. I stayed at my brother Ryan's place, ignoring Sarah's endless calls and messages. She swung between desperate pleas for forgiveness, angry accusations that I was being unreasonable, and tearful reminders about our baby. Every message only steeled my resolve to stay away. One evening, after I ignored yet another call, Ryan finally spoke up. You need to hear her out, he said, though I could tell he was just trying to figure out how I would handle the divorce. I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been meticulously logging every suspicious event from the past few months. Oh, I'll hear her out, I replied, my voice calm but resolute. But on my terms, not hers. The thing about Sarah was that she had always underestimated me. She'd viewed my trusting nature as naivete and my patience as weakness. Even now, she probably thought I'd eventually calm down and accept her excuses. What she didn't understand was that while she was leaving voicemails begging for forgiveness, I was quietly dismantling the life we'd built together. First, I contacted our family lawyer, Marcus, who had handled my parents' estate after. Their tragic accident 2 years ago had shaken me, but I had trusted him completely. Now, the pregnancy complicated everything, as he warned during our meeting. Even if you're not the biological father, he said, if you're married when the child is born, you'll be presumed to be the father. I cut him off. How soon can we file? The next step was harder. I drove to Sarah's parents' house, the very place where I had once asked for their blessing before proposing. Carol, Sarah's mother, answered the door with a welcoming smile, but it faltered when she saw my expression. James, what's wrong? Sarah's been calling us, but won't tell us what's going on. I told them everything. They deserve to know why their daughter's marriage was falling apart. Carol cried, and Tom, Sarah's father, sat in stony silence. His face grew darker with each new revelation. We didn't raise her to be this way, Carol whispered when I finished. No, I agreed quietly, but it's who she chose to become. As I was leaving, Tom stopped me. Whatever you're planning, he said in a low voice, she earned it. The support of Sarah's own parents should have felt like a victory, but it only magnified how thoroughly she had betrayed everyone who cared for her. Back at Ryan's house, I received an email from Mike's wife, Jessica. Yes, Mike was married too, something Sarah had conveniently left out. I had found Jessica's contact information through a little social media research and sent her a detailed account of everything I had uncovered. Her response was simple. Can we meet? There's more you need to know. We arranged to meet at a small diner the next morning. Jessica turned out to be a petite woman with weary eyes and a determined look about her. She brought a stack of papers with her. Mike's done this before, she said without preamble, sliding the papers across the table. 2 years ago, with another employee. She got pregnant too. The company paid her off and transferred her to the London office. My grip tightened around my coffee cup. And you stayed with him? We have kids, she said simply, before continuing. But I've been gathering evidence ever since, bank statements, hotel receipts, emails. I've been waiting for the right moment. Your wife's pregnancy just moved up my timeline. I flipped through the documents, my mind racing. Does Mike know you of all this? Jessica smiled grimly. Not yet, but he will. The question is, do you want to coordinate our moves, or should we handle our own spouses separately? I thought about it for a moment. I think we can help each other. I have a plan, but it'll work better if we do this together. She leaned forward, her eyes cold and determined. I'm listening. As I outlined my ideas, I saw that same hard resolve in Jessica's eyes that I felt in my heart. Sarah and Mike had no idea what was coming. They had thought they were the only ones capable of clever deception, but they were about to learn how wrong they were. After a week of silence, I finally agreed to meet Sarah at our house. Walking in felt surreal. Everything looked the same as when I had left, but nothing felt the same. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea, looking smaller somehow. The confident, self-assured woman I had once known seemed distant and lost. The confident woman I had married seemed to shrink in front of me. You've lost weight, she said quietly as I sat down across from her. Are you eating? Let's not pretend you care about my well-being, I replied, my voice steady and calm. I'm here to talk about practical matters. Her face crumpled. Of course I care, James. I know I messed up terribly, but I love you. We can get through this. We can go to counseling, work on rebuilding trust. Like you did with Mike's wife. I shot back. Sarah's face drained of color. What did Jessica say? She asked, her voice shaking. I pulled out my phone and played a recording. Mike's voice came through loud and clear, his irritation evident as he discussed their situation with Sarah. Jessica had recorded it during one of their recent arguments. You've been talking to Jessica? Sarah's voice quivered. She told me everything, I replied. She told me about your pattern of seducing employees and the last pregnant mistress who got shipped off to London. I paused for effect. Tell me, Sarah, was that your backup plan? A transfer if things went south? Tears spilled down her face. It wasn't like that. Mike told me he and Jessica were separated, that they were getting a divorce. You didn't want to know the truth, I countered. Just like you didn't want to know how it would destroy me when I found out. I set a manila envelope on the table and slid it across to her. Here's what's going to happen now, I said, my voice cold. Divorce papers. I don't want to fight over assets. You can keep the house, your car, everything. All I want is a clean break and your signature acknowledging that I'm not the father of your child. Sarah's hand shook as she opened the envelope. You can't just throw away 3 years of marriage. You already did that, I said quietly. I'm just making it official. And what about Mike? She asked, a trace of her old defiance returning. Are you planning some kind of revenge? I smiled, and something in my expression made Sarah lean back. Mike's situation is already being handled, I said. Jessica's thorough. She's been documenting his history with employees for years. This morning, the company board received a very interesting package of evidence. Sarah's eyes widened. What did you do? Me? I replied, nothing. But it turns out companies don't appreciate former executives who make a habit of impregnating subordinates, especially when those subordinates file complaints about coercion, threats of retaliation. That's a lie. Sarah burst out. Then you'll have no problem testifying to that under oath when the company's lawyers investigate, I said. I'm sure they'll be very interested in your thoughts on workplace dynamics and consensual relationships. The color drained from her face as the weight of the situation sank in. Her career, her reputation, the life she had carefully built. It was all on the verge of unraveling. You wouldn't, she whispered. You're right, I replied calmly. I wouldn't. Because I don't need to do anything. The wheels are already in motion. All you need to decide is how much damage you're willing to take along with him. I stood, leaving the divorce papers in front of her. You have 24 hours to sign these. After that, things get much more complicated for everyone involved. As I reached the door, Sarah's voice cracked. I never meant to hurt you, James. You have to believe that. I pause, my hand on the doorknob. The problem, Sarah, is that I don't believe anything you say anymore. But don't worry. Soon, you won't have to lie to me ever again. The company's emergency board meeting lasted 3 hours. I knew because Jessica texted me updates from the parking lot, where she waited with her lawyer. When Mike finally emerged, escorted by security and holding a cardboard box, his face was hollow. It was as if he could see his entire world crumbling before his eyes. Sarah signed the divorce papers that evening, not because she met my deadline, but because Mike had already thrown her under the bus that Mike's desperate email to the company board was a final attempt to salvage his reputation. He portrayed Sarah as the aggressor, accusing her of threatening to file harassment claims if he didn't continue their affair. To back his version of events, he included selected text messages. Of course, he's just trying to protect himself, Jessica remarked when we met the next day over coffee, claiming he's a victim of a predatory employee rather than a supervisor abusing his power. Classic Mike. I watched detached as Sarah's once carefully crafted life began to unravel. The following morning, HR asked for her resignation, and the legal team wasted no time in securing their interests. They offered her a non-disclosure agreement and a small severance, far less than what they had given Mike's previous mistress. This time, they weren't taking any risks, especially with Jessica's evidence showing a troubling pattern of corporate cover-ups. Sarah's parents were unsympathetic. They refused to let her move back in. Actions have consequences, Tom had said when she called, crying. Carol, her mother, later told me they had suggested she find a therapist to understand her actions. She needs to figure out why she does these things, Carol explained, her voice thick with grief. This isn't the daughter we raised. The final blow came from an unexpected place. Sarah's sister Emma, once Sarah's closest ally. Emma publicly severed ties with her through a post on social media about betrayal and family values. It quickly went viral, forcing Sarah to delete all of her accounts as people in their circle connected the dots. Emma's actions cut deeper than I could have imagined. Mike didn't fare much better. Jessica's divorce filing contained proof of his many affairs, unauthorized use of company funds, and financial mismanagement. His reputation in the industry was destroyed. The last I heard, he was considering a move to another state. 3 months after everything had crumbled, I ran into Sarah one last time. She was leaving a doctor's office just as I was heading into the coffee shop next door. Her pregnancy was undeniable now, a constant reminder of the lies that had fractured our marriage. "James," she said, stopping in front of me. "I've been wanting to talk to you." I didn't respond immediately. "Don't," I said quietly but firmly. "Please, just let me say this," she continued. I looked at her, no longer clouded by the manipulation I had once seen. "You were right about everything," she said, her voice soft. "I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I did what I did. I know it doesn't change anything, but I am truly sorry. Not just for the affair, but for who I became, for who I really was all along." I studied her face, the one I had once known better than my own. "You know what the worst part was, Sarah?" I said slowly. "It wasn't the affair. It wasn't even the baby. It was realizing that every day for months you woke up next to me, looked me in the eye, and chose to lie over and over again. That kind of betrayal doesn't just break trust. It shatters the entire foundation of who we thought we were together." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I know I destroyed something precious, and I have to live with that. I hope one day you can forgive me. Not for my sake, but for yours. You deserve peace." "I have peace," I replied. "The moment I stopped trying to understand why you did it and just accepted that you did, I found my peace. I don't hate you anymore, Sarah. I don't feel anything for you." I turned and walked past her into the coffee shop, ordered my drink, and didn't look back. Sometimes, the best form of revenge isn't about causing pain or destruction. Sometimes, it's about walking away and letting people face the natural consequences of their actions. Sarah and Mike had built their relationship on lies and deceit. All I had to do was step back and watch it all burn to the ground. My phone buzzed with a message from my real estate agent about a promising property listing in another city. It was time to start fresh, somewhere where every street corner didn't remind me of betrayal. As I drove to view the house, I felt a weight lift from me. Sarah had taught me an invaluable lesson about trust and consequences. It wasn't a lesson she meant to teach me, but it was one I would never forget.